welcome. My name is AB. I run the Watch Collecting Tribe Productions, and in today's episode, I'm going to be showcasing to you guys the Seiko Batman. I'm going to be giving you guys the full review and the full specifications of this watch, and actually, I'm going to be telling you why I personally think that this is worth it, and this is an absolute grail Seiko. So let's just get straight to the point. The Seiko LX line is not your average release from the brand. This was Seiko's way of showing people that they're capable of making high-end watches that actually deserve a seat next to the greats like Rolex or Omega. The Batman bezel is definitely reminiscent of the Rolex BLNR, and having handled both, I'm surprised to say that the level of quality and craftsmanship is above the Rolex. Now before you guys flame me in the comments, just bear with me. I'm not getting paid whatsoever by Seiko, and no, this is not clickbait. I genuinely believe that when you take a closer look at this watch, you're gonna see why this is actually a level above the Rolex BLNR. Now, if you don't want to take my word for it, or you just can't see it in footage, what makes this watch so special, then you'd only have to look at the GPHG and see that Seiko's LX Prospex Diver actually won the overall prize in the divers category against major competition. Keep in mind, the GPHG is a very difficult competition with some of the hardest judges to please. Even though this is the GMT version, it's finished exactly the same like the diver with the added complication, and as you guys can see, the watch is exceptionally finished. Now, to fully understand what makes this Seiko so special and why I said it rivals the Rolex BLNR, we have to look closer at the watch. When first picking up the watch, you immediately notice the build quality of this piece. While I have experienced dozens of dive watches to this day, nothing really felt as tactical or solid as the Seamaster or the Submariner. Not until I picked up this watch. It has an extremely solid feel to it that gives you the comfort that this watch is an absolute beast. It will take anything you throw at it. Now the second thing you notice, which is probably my first negative, is the size. Now we'll come back to this with the specifications, but there's no getting around it. This is a big watch, which is probably the biggest factor that most don't consider it when thinking of a solid dive watch. Most consider the Seamaster or the Rolex because they're hovering anywhere from 40 to 42 millimeters. Now I do wish that they come out with at least a 40 millimeter version. If they ever do that, I'll be adding it to my collection. Now finally, there's no doubt that the inspiration comes from the BLNR. However, having handled both, they're very different, and one of the biggest factors is actually the bezel. While the BLNR has a ceramic bezel which gives it a shiny aesthetic, the Seiko actually is protected by sapphire, which gives it a more mute aesthetic, which I quite like, and it makes it a little bit different in the metal. I definitely didn't get any BLNR vibes except from the color itself. Typically, AB with a hat tends to forget a lot of details, as you guys make it very clear in the comment section. So luckily, I'm going to be showing you what Zaratsu polishing actually looks like. Here's the thing, every time somebody asks me what is Zaratsu polishing, I tend to give them the website description. Zaratsu polishing is a mirror-like polishing, blah blah blah. But with this case, it's actually very obvious what it looks like. So I'm going to show you what Zaratsu polishing is actually like. What actually are you getting when, Seiko says Zaratsu polishing? Is it a gimmick or is there actually a difference? Now I'm not going to get too technical about Zaratsu polishing. Instead, I'm going to make a full video in depth explaining what Zaratsu polishing actually is. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that video. But in short, Zaratsu polishing is a process to make the watch look like it's distortion free. And as you guys can see, having this watch against the matte, it contours to the case as if the matte is actually inside the watch, and it looks absolutely stunning. Even if you look at it from a further distance, you'll see that it's as if that matte is part of the case, and that's what they were going for, a very low distortion. So in short, Zaratsu polishing is one of the clearest polishing you can get on any watch. Now most of you may have noticed that extremely smooth sweep, and you're probably thinking there's no way this has a spring drive movement because it isn't a Grand Seiko. But this is actually a spring drive movement, specifically the 5R66, which is the GMT version of a spring drive. Now it isn't the same like the Grand Seiko spring drive, although you do get the plus or minus 1 second per day, 10 seconds per month, and also the 72 hours of power reserve. However, what makes this different from Grand Seiko is behind that closed case back, the caliber isn't finished to Grand Seiko standards, which could be a negative for you. Nonetheless, you're still getting that beautiful smooth sweep and you're still getting the accuracy you would expect from a spring drive caliber. Now, as I mentioned before, numbers don't always add up. Despite the fact that this is a big watch, I'm going to show you guys that it actually looks good on the wrist, and in my opinion, even if you have a smaller wrist size, it will still look good. It's still a bigger watch. The specifications of this watch is specifically 44.8 millimeters with a 14.7 millimeter thickness, which makes it kind of thick on the wrist, but as you guys can see, it still looks really good. Now, what made this watch very wearable on the wrist was specifically the lug-to-lug. Like the SKX watches, like most of Seiko watches, they really focused on the lug-to-lug with around 48 millimeters. It makes it quite wearable for any wrist, but keep in mind, even though that numbers don't always add up, it's still a big watch, and that could actually be a positive for you, or it could be a negative, but keep in mind it is a bigger watch. So in the famous words of John Mayer, you have to look closer, especially with this Seiko, to completely understand the level of detail and finishing on this watch. Take a look at the brushing on the hands, even the power reserve, the indices, everything is exceptionally finished. You guys can even see the date window. The dial is absolutely stunning. It looks like an infinite blue hole. Even the GMT hand, or all the hands, actually had no dust particles or foreign material on them. The level of finishing on the bezel and every single detail on this watch is outstanding, and in my opinion, it's all finished to Grand Seiko standards. Now, you guys heavily requested to know about the bracelet and the lume, and the bracelet on this watch is outstanding. Although the clasp does have a very standard clasp for the price point, keep in mind this watch is constructed of titanium, so everything is really comfortable, including the watch. And finally, here's a lume shot for you guys. I know a lot of you have been requesting this. So guys, is this watch worth it? In my opinion, yes. Keep in mind, I choose all of the watches I decide to review on this channel, and I decided to show this to you guys because this watch has Grand Seiko all over it. The finishing of this watch is absolutely phenomenal. The dial is one of the best I've ever seen from Seiko, and everything about this watch is absolutely Grand Seiko. The only difference is there's no Grand on the dial. So if you can get over the fact that it has Seiko on the dial, and you look at the watch as a whole, there's a lot of things about this watch that screams luxury. This is finished to a level that a lot of even luxury brands aren't even this good. Zaratsu polishing, spring drive movement, an absolutely stunning dial. Everything about this watch makes it a Grail Seiko. So you have to be a really big fan of Seiko to probably go for this watch. I would absolutely love to add this to my collection, but if you can't get over the fact that it is a Seiko, then you should probably just go with Grand Seiko. But guys, as always, make sure you check out exquisitetimepieces.com if you're interested in this watch or any watch. Make sure you tell them that you heard about them from Watch Collecting Strategy channel, and they will hook you up over there at exquisitetimepieces.com. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.